Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Kavya Gupta, and welcome to the SLB GSDSEF SLB workshop number 6. And this is the Science Fair Notebook workshop. Today, we'll be talking about what are the different components of the Science Fair Notebook and how should your Science Fair poster be presented and what are the guidelines and restrictions for that. So if you have any questions about any of these things, you can start putting that in the chat or you can wait until afterwards. And as I said before, my name is Kavya and I've participated in Science Fair for 3 years and my category is computational biology. If Arnav or Sanvi want to go, you can. Okay, Arnav.
Hi, my name is Sanvi. I've participated in the Science Fair for 2 years. That's my 3rd year. And yeah.
Hi, I'm Arnav. I'm a freshman at CCA. This is my 3rd year at the Science Fair, and I participate in computer science and math.
Okay, great. Okay, can everyone see the screen? Yeah, okay, cool. So we're going to first talk a little bit about the Science Fair notebook. Just as a reminder, this notebook is one of the components that you will be bringing into your fair or into the fair days. So this is one of the things that you'll need to bring through the check-in. So the day before the actual fair judging, you're going to be screened for all the materials that you bring in. So your Science Fair notebook should be included in this. And the format of this is usually a binder in which you print out all of the pages of your notebook and you'll put it in. Sometimes people choose to put it in different sheets of paper or different sheets of plastic. Sometimes people put in directly, but that's up to you. And then during the judging sessions, your judges will use your notebook as kind of a supplementary materials type of thing. So after you present your project, give your little 2 to 3 minute explanation of what your project's about. And after you have your conversation with your judge, then your judge might take a little bit of time to look through your notebook. If they have any other additional questions, they'll also ask you about that. So if you want to get started, I'll go to the next slide. Oh, and just before we do that, the information that we're going to be going over today is all linked in the GSDSEF.org website. So this is actually one of the files that you can find, and it's the example student notebook. And today we'll be going over what the student notebook should look like and what are the different components of it. And this very first page that I'm showing right now, it's a checklist or a timeline that can be used. And basically, if you are at the stage where you can start compiling all of your information, you can go through this checklist to see if you have all the things and start working on the different components that you maybe still need to finish. So this is definitely a helpful resource, and we'll be going into detail about every single one of the pages.
Okay, so we can start with the title slide or page. So the title should be around a maximum 12 words long, and it should be basically a brief input into what your project should look like. So the first title that you submitted into the screening can be changed, and the next title submission is due on the 22nd on the SLB website, along with the abstract, which we'll go over later. So that should be completed by this week, Wednesday. And if you do change your project from the original screening, make sure to let someone know, because that'll be used as a reference point to refer to your project in the actual science fair. So you can email the GSDSEF or Mr. Rodecker to let them know that you changed your project. And the title page just includes your project, and if you want an image that basically represents your project. So after the title page, you're going to have a table of contents, which will represent each section of your notebook and the page number to go along with it. And this is really important because while the judges are going through your notebook, they're going to want to know where everything is so they can easily reference it rather than spending all the time looking through your notebook. So this will be a way for them to reference where everything is and find answers to whatever questions they're looking for and whatever thing or methods they want to find in your notebook. Okay, so the abstract is a very important part of your project, and it's essentially a summary of everything you did from the background to the procedure to the results and the conclusion. But it should be very short and a maximum of 250 words. And so only around a couple sentences maybe for each section, and very to the point rather than explaining everything you did. This will be a general overview for what your judges should expect from your project and allow someone reading to understand what the results of your project will be and what you're investigating and your hypothesis and your research question. So make sure this is at the front of your notebook. And your abstract should also be the only thing on the page to emphasize its importance, because mixing it up with the acknowledgements or some other section might reduce from its value. So make sure that's the only thing on the first page after the table of contents. And again, the abstract is due this Wednesday on the SLB website. So make sure to finalize that abstract by then. You can make slight changes in your notebook, but that is essentially the final version that will be submitted. Okay, so after the abstract, there's the acknowledgements that is pretty short and should just be basically who helped you, who would you like to thank and appreciate for your guidance throughout the project. This can be mentioned with some other things along with the introduction or some definitions that you might want to include, because this is typically short and shouldn't really take up the whole page. So then there's the introduction. And this is essentially how you came up with your project idea, what got you interested in this topic, and why you decided to submit this into the science fair. And you should really describe the why as to why you decided this project and why it's interested to you specifically out of the thousands of topics out there. And the judges really want to see how your particular passion is integrated with what you decided to research. So make sure you explain the story behind how you came up with this idea and why it's so important to you personally. Okay. So here is the review of literature, and this should be so far the longest part of the notebook that you have, at a minimum of 3 pages, double space of size 12 font. And the review of literature basically describes all the past research you did before conducting this project. So research about if you use bacteria, the history behind them, how they function, past research studies that have been conducted that use similar methods and that have come up with similar results and how your project is different from those, and any past research you read that may help the judges understand what you're doing in this project, why you're doing it, and any particular procedures or devices you used and the methods of how they function. So this is important to understand the information behind your project, and that will set the basis for the future results and conclusions. And the explanations you use in the conclusions will be taken from the background research. So make sure this is a very long, thorough explanation about everything you've done and read for your project that'll help understand your procedures in the future. So yeah, again, this should include past publications that you read and should be very in-depth about what they've done and the functions of all the methods and materials you used. Okay. So then after the review of literature, there's the statement of problem. And this is where I explain what you typically want to. So this will be either a question or a statement. And it's basically your research question about what exactly you're investigating and what question you want to answer with this experiment. So some of the examples given in this is, does pre-treating radish seeds by soaking them in water for different times affect the germination percentage and growth rate of plants. So they're mentioning their specific independent variable, what they're testing, and then they're stating their dependent variable, what they're measuring, which is the germination percentage and the growth rate of plants. So make sure you mention both of these things and how you're investigating whether these are correlated or what you expect to get from your project. Okay, and then this is the hypothesis, which is directly answering the research question that you just stated on the last page. Some people often put the research question and the hypothesis on the same page since they're pretty related and complementary. So it's basically a testable answer to the scientific question. And it essentially is your prediction about what is going to happen in the experiment. So in the conclusion, your hypothesis will either be supported or refuted. But based on your background research, this is what you're going to use to answer your research question. So an example given in this is, it is hypothesized that the radish seeds soaked in water for 4 hours will have a higher germination percentage and higher growth rate than the seeds that are not soaked, the control, and seeds that are soaked for 24 hours. So again, here they mentioned specifically what sample they think will have a higher germination percentage and what results they expect from that sample, which again correlates to the research question. Okay. And then these are the materials that you're going to use to conduct your experiment. So the materials should be very concise and very detailed and specific, because it should be able that someone reading the materials should be able to replicate your project. So they need to know exactly what you used to get the project done. So if you're using bacteria, what strain of bacteria you used, what company you got it from, etc. So brands should all be mentioned. And if you're doing like a computational biology project, you should mention what specific softwares you used, what versions of those softwares, and all the other components you use to conduct your project. Again, it should be replicable, so very specific and detailed, rather than just a rough overview of what you did. So here, again, they're mentioning the exact number of packets they used, the brands of packets, the size of the materials, and etc. So also, the materials can be grouped according to different parts of the project. So if you use, let's say, these materials to measure germination rate, you can put those in the first group, and these materials to measure the growth of the plant, you can put them after that. This just helps organize the materials and helps readers understand better what you use them for and how these apply to your project.
All right, so next we have the procedure. So the procedure is a step-by-step description of how you did your project. It's recommended that you have some pictures. You also want to have some details so that if someone else decides they want to try out your project, they should be able to reproduce it perfectly. And if there are multiple procedures that you ran throughout your project, make sure to clearly define which part you are talking about. And if there are different versions of your procedures that you tried and tested, focus on the latest one at the beginning and add footnotes to show that you made changes. Again, it's important to have some pictures at the end because this also visually shows the judges how you did your project. Next, we have results, which is the data that you collected, responses, reactions, and results you observed. Keep your rough handwritten notes, drawings, and your daily log, etc. These will all go in the appendix of your project notebook. Do not do any analysis or personal thoughts in this section. It is purely for the raw results. Make sure all of your data, graphs, and charts are properly labeled and you have figure captions with number labeling in each one. You need to describe what are the different parts of the figure and key variables. So in each graph, just make sure you include like label the X and Y lines and the title. Does the notebook need to be handwritten? Is the question in the chat. So no, the notebook does not need to be handwritten. You can type it up, but it will need to be printed out for the final fair. So next, we have data analysis, which is where you write an analysis of your data, why you think you got those results, based on trends, patterns, and any calculations of the data. So right now, you've just organized your data into tables and graphs. What information does the data you collected tell you? What trends or patterns do you see? By closely analyzing your data and identifying any patterns, you'll be able to draw and support a conclusion. In your analysis summary, identify and discuss any trends or patterns that you see in your data. Compare and contrast the data and refer to the calculated average, means, medians, mode, percentage difference, and or standard deviations, and any other statistical analysis that might be useful. The statements in your analysis needs to be objective and based only in the data. Next, we have the conclusion, which explains how did your tests and experiments work out. Did your findings support or not support your hypotheses? Include a discussion on your results. This is where you refer back to the statement of your problem and an introduction to see whether or not your project answers your question and if your hypothesis was correct or not. You need to use your background information and review of literature to offer an explanation for this data. We now have recommendations, which is your ideas on possible uses for your findings and any additional tests which should be made. What would you do this project again? Or could you continue this project another year? In this section, you need to brainstorm future questions and other things that your project results have led you to wonder about. Remember, if you're thinking about the future questions to address, they should be significantly different than what your current question is. You should show how your results prompted you with these specific questions. All right. Now we have the bibliography, which is a list of items referenced or used as you research this project. Include interviews of people who gave you information. In the junior division, which is middle school students, you need 5 sources, and high school students in the senior division need 10 sources. You should use MLA citations for all your sources. You can easily find websites that help you out with this online. And we have one more section to go, which is the appendices. This is where you show photos, graphs, your daily log, and all the raw data. These are your supplemental information section where you can put any extra data, trials, and simulations you may have run. If you felt they didn't relate to the conclusion directly, make sure to include them here. Question in the chat. What part in the notebook should we include the daily log? So I recommend you add the daily log to your appendices, as I just said.
Okay, great. Does anyone have any questions about the notebook? Yes, you can put in chat. So the notebook seems to be very similar to the screening slide deck. What are the differences between these two types of materials? So the screening slide deck was just an introduction to the people who are screening your projects to see whether or not your project is meeting all of the science fair guidelines. So for example, if you have any wet lab projects working with different animals, or if you have human surveys and things like that you're doing, they're ensuring that you're following all the guidelines and you're allowed to collect the data as you do so. So that is just a brief overview. So you wouldn't go into any detail in terms of like review of literature and things like that. So the notebook, on the other hand, is like a longer version of the screening slideshow. So in the notebook, this is where you're actually able to go through all of your results and give detailed explanations with bigger captions and put more of your own analysis into like words. So of course the notebook, it won't be something that you'll be covering word to word when you're talking with your judges, but this is something that your judges will use as an additional extra information. If you have any specific questions, perhaps of maybe what things you should or shouldn't include in your notebook versus what things that you did include in your screening project, you can let us know afterwards and we can talk with you based on what like project questions you have. But there's definitely a big difference in terms of how much detail you go into between the screening and the notebook. And one thing I'd like to note is a lot of students, they might have not finished their entire project or concluded their analysis, their data analysis of the project by the screening deadlines. So the notebook gives a little bit more time for you to, again, go more in depth and finish up the final results and conclusions. So this is definitely like, you can think of it as a scientific report versus the screening project or the screening slide deck was just a brief overview. And then in terms of when the notebook is due, so the notebook is due when you're going into your into the fair week for your screening or your like safety checks. So this is when you're bringing in your poster board. So the exact date is, it would be Tuesday, March 14th, because you have to go for your student project setup. And when you do that, you're going to have different SLB students and other adults that will be checking whether or not you have your notebook, whether or not your poster meets all the guidelines. We'll be going over all the guidelines for the poster just in a few minutes, but that's when all these materials are due.
Also, I would like to add that while the notebook is due during the science fair week, when you're actually bringing in your poster, it's recommended that you turn it in on CFairs by March 3rd, because all of the society judging, which is basically like other companies that are going to read your projects and like basically read your projects, and if your project is related to their interests, then they'll talk to you about it. That will all be based on your ZFair submission. So if you don't submit the notebook by then, that they will not be able to see that.
Yeah, that is one thing to know. Okay. So March 3rd, correct? Yeah. Okay, any other questions? Yes, so in terms of having electric power at the booth in the fairs, like at the fair, there are certain materials, whether or not you can bring them in. I guess we'll be going over that in a little bit. Are there any final questions for the notebook right now, or otherwise we can go to the project display regulations and such? Do you have any questions?
I have a question. In my analysis, not my analysis, I forgot what it's called, but the one that has like all the everything, all the data.
Okay, so
I think it's called like the abstract. I think it was.
okay.
Not that. But it was like, is it okay if I have sticky notes separating like this is my graphs, this is my raw data?
So you're talking about on your notebook or on your poster board?
Notebook.
Notebook. I would recommend that you can probably label them. For example, if you are like typing up your notebook, then you can label them beforehand. But if you want to add additional like tabs, then you can also do that. Just so like you can highlight that this is a specific graph that you might want the judge to look at and things like that. Does that kind of help?
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions about the notebook? Otherwise, we're going to go over to the poster board regulations and the things that you can bring into the fair. Okay, let's go on to the different project display regulations. So this year, the science fair is moving back into in-person. That means we have many different regulations that we need to follow when bringing in our poster board. So if any of you have participated in the fair the last 2 years, you might remember all of the submissions were online. For example, your notebook and your screening and the slides, the judging slide deck was all submitted through ZFairs. But this year, that's going to shift and you're going to be required to create a poster board. So scientific poster boards are a condensed version of your notebook, right? So these are things that you should specifically put on your poster board that you want to talk about with your judge. So the poster will have the different sections. So for example, you will have an abstract, you will have an introduction, you'll have a methods section, as well as your procedures, methods and procedures, as well as your materials section. And then you might also include a conclusions. But instead of writing everything down in words and copying it down from your student notebook, you might focus on the figures, putting in images and different informational figures so that you can verbalize and like talk with the judge about the things that you want to talk about. I'll be showing some examples of past science fair poster boards, I guess, just before we can get started, so that you can kind of get an idea of what they look like. So some students, they choose to hand create like their poster boards. So as you can see, the student has used construction paper and printed out their figures as well as their procedures and results for their poster board. But on the other hand, some students, we'll see in a minute, this is again another example of a handmade poster board, and all of them are traditionally on a trifold poster. So this is an example of a student that has printed out their entire poster. So this is also allowed at the science fair. And what you need to do is you would create your poster board digitally. There's a lot of templates online that you can find in order to create those digital poster boards. And then you can put it on a trifold poster or trifold poster board. So we can just go through some examples and then I'll talk specifically about the guidelines. So this is another example of a digital poster that was then printed out. And we'll also be talking about what are some items that you can put on your table along with the poster board. So as you can see, the student has a prototype behind them as well as their student notebook. So as we were talking about before, you put your student notebook in a binder, and this is how, just as an example of how one student has done this. Okay, we can go through some other examples later on, but let's go through the display requirements. So all student exhibitors must adhere to the following requirements and regulations in order to participate in the GSDSEF. But for example, if you do move on to other fairs such as the International Science and Engineering Fair, there may be additional requirements or restrictions. So depending on the regional versus the state versus like the international competitions, you should know that you might need to change your poster and your exhibitions depending on the different requirements. So first of all, let's talk about the display requirements. So as I showed, most students use trifold posters because there's different requirements for the project display board. So the depth should be at from front to back, it should be between 30 inches or around 30 inches or 76 centimeters. The width, so that's side to side, should be around 48 inches, and the height should be this is all like should be less than 77 inches. So the height from the floor, so because we would put it on a table, it would be, it should be no more than 108 inches. So these are the guidelines. You can have them smaller than this, but depends on how you want to create your poster board. And they may be freestanding on the floor. So one of the examples that we saw earlier where it was from top to bottom, but it must not be more than 108 inches. And these displays that require floor space rather than a table will need different pre-approval at least 1 month before Fair Week by February 10th. So that was last week, but hopefully if you are using more floor space, then you should have, I guess, noted these requirements beforehand as well. So a standard trifold display board is 36 by 48 inches, which is approximately which fit approximately the requirements for the display. So you can also attach 2 display boards on top of each other to create a longer display. I believe we also saw an example of that earlier on as well. So this would be an example of like a regular trifold board with the poster head on top. And then this would be an example of having 2 trifold boards on top of each other. And there are some like example templates on the website as well, so you can go through them. One of them is for science for projects, one of them for engineering projects. So you can just open that up and it'll talk more in detail about what are some of the components. So as I said, it's a condensed version of your science notebook. So these are some of the things that you should keep in mind when making your poster. Any questions about poster guidelines, requirements, things like that? Okay. In that case, we're going to be talking about like some of the additional materials that you do need to bring in. One of them being the project notebook, and the other one being any additional like models or prototypes that you might want to bring. For the digital poster board templates. Yes, we actually, they're not linked on the website, but for our mentorship programs and such, we do give out these like resources. So if you stay at the end, I can put in some of these resources in the chat, and we can share those. Okay, so about these additional freestanding items, as I said before, you need to bring in your project notebook on check-in day, as the judges arrive early on judging day to review project notebooks. So, and they must also be attached to the display board with a string or a chain. So as we said before, you need to bring in these notebooks early on, because the judges, they will come in early in the morning before you do your judging sessions, and they will look through the project notebook as well. And you should always connect your project notebook to your display board somehow. So what some students do is they will attach it to the binder ring, and then they can attach it to the board that way, just in case these project notebooks aren't like confused between different students and different projects, as you are lined up close to each other. Okay, next, the models and or prototypes. So these are any of the additional materials that you might bring in to kind of explain a little bit more about your project. These things are required to go through size and safety check before entering into the judging hall and check-in day. So once again, there's different safety and regulation requirements and different rules for these materials and prototypes, but you must bring them in early on so that you can ensure that they meet all the guidelines, and this is the day before the judging. Just general additional reminders, all project materials and apparatus and engineering prototypes must fit within the project table booth space. So because you are lined up against each other, you need to be respectful of other students' space. So they must be fitting, I would say, approximately like a regular personal table size. We can see some of the other photos. You can approximate how much space you have. And additional items or posters that are only meant to enhance visual display and are not part of actual research project or prototypes are discouraged, and they may be rejected during the size and shape safety check on check-in day. So this is important because, again, we don't have a lot of space, so you should only bring in things that you might use, or maybe some props that you might use during your like verbal presentation with the judge. Okay, so there are some general guidelines about what the photos and images in citations can show. There must not be any offensive or inappropriate images. All images must be properly cited. So, for example, if you're using an image of like a cicada or something that you didn't take, like a picture of any animals that you maybe got off of Google, you must give proper citations to this original source. And there's more guidelines on how to do that. And then if you are including photos of student researchers or different depictions of other people, you must have a signed consent form, especially if they're a minor. And you must also note that in your project notebook. And then depending on your presentations, videos, and images, for example, if you're showing a video of your prototype outside of the fair environment, then you might need to get that checked. Keep in mind, for example, if you have something like a drone or things like that, you will not be able to run that during the fair, like inside. You might be able to use it, but any like battery operated devices must be like turned off, especially during the fair. I'm not going to go through all of these, all of the different requirements and I guess display guidelines, but you can, I guess, go through this website, and again, all of this information is posted on the GSDSEF project display requirements page, so you can go through in detail if you have any specific questions. I'm going to be answering some of the questions in the chat though, so you can start putting those in, and we can, I guess, like scroll through the safety regulations and such, just to see if you guys have any other questions about that. So just to answer some of the things in the chat. So you will be able to use electric power at the booth in the fair, but mainly just for using your laptop and such. So as you saw in one of the pictures as well, there's a student that was using a laptop. So in your title, if you use an emoji, you won't have to cite it, I guess, because it's like general and it's in your title. But if you have any other images, then you would have to cite it. So images of any other pictures or references that you might have taken from other literature, then you do have to cite that.
Thank you.
And then, is the laptop allowed to show the video at the booth? So yes, as I said before, if you are showing any video or any other like presentations at the booth, you will have to have this approved by the safety and screening like check the day before. So they'll probably ask you like what you're using your laptop for, and if you have a video, then they will check it there, and then during the fair you will be allowed to use it. And one of the reasons for this, again, is like if you have any like engineering models and things that you're not actually allowed to run at the fair, you take a video of it beforehand and then present it using your laptop. So on ZFairs, there's an option to upload a video. What would the video be about? So this would be anything like, it depends on where it is actually. Sanvi, do you know which one? Because it could be the
Yeah, I think for ZFairs, the video is the judging presentation video. So it should just be like a brief overview of your project. So maybe like the abstract or something with some visual to go along with it if you want.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's about 2 minutes or so was the limit last year.
Yes. So the judging like presentation, this would be like your small like elevator speech that you would give to your judges, and I believe like that's the video for the ZFairs. Is there internet connection at the fair? I believe there is. There's like the Balboa Park like Wi-Fi, and there's that internet connection, but if that doesn't work, I would recommend like using something like Hotspot. So parents are not allowed in the fair during the judging sessions. So when you're checking in and setting up your poster the day before, so on March 14th, parents are allowed to come in and help the student project setup. But during the judging day, so Wednesday, March 15th, no parents are allowed. It is only students. So students will be dropped off in the morning, and there's volunteers and other like GSDSEF like board members that will be helping I guess guide the students, but during judging, parents are not allowed. We also do have a like family day, or not necessarily family day, but it's the BPAC is open to the public. So if you would like family or any other parents or siblings to come in, check out your project, that is, you are able to do that on Saturday, March 18th, so from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Okay, I will be stopping the recording right now, but if anyone has any other questions, please do put it in the chat. We'll be doing the question and answer session right now. And those of you watching online, thank you for joining, and we hope to see you at the next workshop.